In a peaceful village nestled between two towering mountains, there lived a young man named Suriya. Despite living in such a tranquil setting, Suriya was far from at peace. He spent most of his days observing and criticizing the people around him. His neighbors, he thought, were lazy and selfish. They seemed to lack any sense of discipline, and their greed often disgusted him. To Suriya, the fault for his growing frustration lay squarely on the shoulders of others. He believed that the world would be a better place if only everyone else would change their ways. And so, he made it his mission to point out their flaws, hoping they would take his words to heart and transform. But no matter how much he lectured them, no one changed. This left Suriya bitter and angry, wondering why people were so resistant to the obvious truth he was offering. One day, he overheard travelers speaking of a wise monk who lived atop the nearby mountain. They said this monk had a deep understanding of human nature and could help anyone who sought guidance. Eager to find someone who would agree with him and validate his frustration, Suriya decided to visit the monk. The journey to the monk's hut was long and difficult. As Suriya ascended the mountain, his irritation toward the people in his village continued to build. With each step, he replayed the ways they had wronged him in his mind, and by the time he reached the top, his heart was heavy with complaints. When he finally arrived at the monk's simple hut, the monk greeted him with a warm smile and invited him inside. Suriya sat down, eager to speak. Without hesitation, he began venting his frustrations about the villagers. Their laziness, their greed, their unwillingness to change. He went on, listing every flaw he had observed in them. The monk listened patiently, without interrupting. When Suriya finally paused, the monk stood up and gestured for him to follow. He led Suriya into a small, quiet room. In the center of the room was a plain mirror hanging on the wall. The monk pointed to it and said, "Look into the mirror." Suriya, confused, did as he was told. He stared at his reflection for a moment before the monk asked, "What do you see?" "I see myself," Suriya replied, wondering what this had to do with the people in his village. The monk nodded, still calm and composed. "Indeed, you see yourself. But when you look at others, all you see are their faults and flaws. What if, instead of focusing on them, you use the mirror of life to reflect on your own actions, thoughts, and behaviors?" Suriya was puzzled. But the villagers are the ones who need to change. They are lazy, greedy, and selfish. I've done nothing wrong. Why should I reflect on myself? The monk smiled kindly and said, "When you focus on the faults of others, you lose sight of your own path. Each time you criticize someone, you turn away from an opportunity to grow yourself. The world around you is a reflection of the world within you. If you want to see change, first, you must be the change. If you wish for peace, kindness, and understanding from others, you must first cultivate those qualities within yourself." Suriya fell silent, realizing that he had spent so much time judging others that he had neglected to look within. The monk continued, "Life is like a mirror. It reflects back to you the energy and intentions you put into it. Instead of trying to change the villagers, why not start by changing yourself? When you are peaceful, compassionate, and patient, you will find that the world around you changes as well." Suriya left the monk's hut with a heavy heart, but a newfound sense of clarity. He realized that he had been so focused on the flaws of others that he had failed to see his own. From that day forward, he made a commitment to reflect on his own thoughts and actions, rather than judging those of others. As time passed, Suriya began to change. He became more patient and compassionate, and with this shift, he noticed something remarkable. The people around him also began to change. The laziness and selfishness he had once seen in his neighbors no longer bothered him as much, and in many cases, they seemed to be kinder and more thoughtful themselves. In the end, Suriya understood that the monk's lesson was true. By focusing on himself, he had transformed both his inner and outer worlds. The moral of the story is, true growth begins when we stop focusing on the faults of others and start reflecting on ourselves. The world around us is a mirror, reflecting back what we put into it.